We begin week 3, and it was a better episode than the second week. Still not as strong as the original premiere episode, but Spy in the House is it's a fun episode. It's very the pacing is incredible with that episode. Oh man. Especially in direct comparison to the previous week's episode. It's much better paced. I think the stakes are higher in it. It's a really good episode. This has been a good week because the Dynasty episode was really good and this episode was really good as well, so it's been a good week. There hasn't been a stinker this week, and there usually is at least one where I'm like, oh gosh, the show. But this is the first episode really in the series that we focus primarily on JR. It's a big deal because he becomes the main focus of the show. Right now, the main focus for the pilot has been namely Pam, which is fine. They're finding their footing. It's all good. This episode, I think the only thing that would be a negative is that the whole thing got resolved by the end. So there's nothing looming over to make you desire, oh, I want to see what happens next week. There's nothing that's really kind of making you itch to see more. The whole family accuses Pam of doing something that she didn't do. And then she finds out that it was the secretary who's been with the Ewing family for many, many, many years. Although this episode's very important, we get the first really tense scene between JR and Sue Ellen. And the history of the show, as we'll keep on going through it, proves that that's one of the crucial relationships of the show. Another thing, and it's very interesting, is that Bobby knows that JR cheats on his wife. And Bobby, because they're brothers, doesn't really have a problem with it. He kind of keeps the secret. Which is interesting because Bobby is supposed to be the moral ground for the show. He's the anchor. But in this, he's not very moral in this. And that makes it a little bit more interesting. It's almost like he hides his eyes for his family. Which is an interest. But also he has a great tension with his family because of them not wanting to accept Pam as his wife. So we get a very interesting, it's a tension that I don't think was intended, but it's there. Because he's supposed to have the moral high ground the whole time. And he really didn't this episode. He did it for only half of the time. But he also, I think the other thing is that we see Bobby's strength again in this episode, and Bobby kind of goes up against JR. And sort of blackmails him because Bobby has known about JR cheating. He lords it over JR that he is going to out him. And JR's like, you wouldn't do that, brothers. And he's like, you're right. I won't do that to you, even though it's the exact thing that you did to me. And Bobby's like, Urgh. Also, Bobby needs to send the bad news to I believe it's a senator that they had been bribing. And they kind of force him to resign. And the senator's not happy about it, but Bobby is the bearer of bad news. Yeah, so while this is a JR episode, and we established JR's cheating, and he's willing to kind of pay for what he gets. And he has no problem of not being close or intimate, emotionally and physically, with his wife. So this is a very important JR episode. It's also an important Bobby episode. Yeah, what this episode does, it's a good standalone episode. Now, granted, there's nothing that's like, oh, I've got to see the next one, because there's no carryover. The story of this episode is over and done, but what it is establishing is these relationships that are very tense, and they don't easily fit. They're more kind of like nagging, like nails on a chalkboard. And it's very, very interesting television. So, yeah, next week. Am I excited for next week's episode? Yes, I'm enjoying the show, but it's not an, oh my gosh, I can't wait. It's just kind of like, hey, it's fun. Good television, fun television. But it's not overwhelming like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. What are the chances? Yeah, it's just not. What would I rate this episode out of 5? 3.5? It was a good episode. It was a solid episode. But there's nothing to make you yearn for the following week. And they'll learn. They'll learn. And really, they were the first of the nighttime soap opera sweep that followed, including Dynasty, followed in its footsteps. And so they're learning, like all the other shows have to learn. But, yeah. So until next week, guys.